Pathbreakers. I'm Neha Bothra. I'm inside the world's largest vaccine manufacturer to meet Adar Poonawalla, the man who played a huge role in humanity's fight against coronavirus. Stay tuned for this very interesting conversation. Adar, thank you very much for joining us on Pathbreakers. I'm grateful for your time.
Pleasure to be here with you, Neha.
So was it always an unstated obvious that you would join Serum Institute as a child? Is this something you always wanted to do? You had other aspirations? Tell us about that.
No, I mean, I always wanted to do so many things. When you're in your 20s and you finish your university and your education, you have all these ideas of what you want to do. Back in the day, more than 20 years ago, we were limited by, technology in terms of whether it's in science or in finance or digitization, so many things. So a lot of the things I wanted to do wasn't possible at that time. I always was curious in science and that part. All my vacations, when I was studying abroad, I would come back here and work with my father, even as a teenager, to just shadow him around and just learn about everything and see that. And I realized very soon that there is no other line of business that would also save lives and have a humanitarian aspect to it. Mm-hmm. So I fell in love with that concept and idea and felt that, the work that I would do or we would be doing here would influence and have a positive impact on humanity. And that's what really drove me from a very young age in my 20s when I joined, when I was only 21 or 22. And then in 2011, of course, when I took over as CEO, I was able to then make all the decisions to invest and make so many different vaccines and go to 170 countries and all of that. So,
Dr. Cyrus Poonawalla is a visionary really, and I think he started Serum in 1966 from scratch. What did he teach you? What did you learn from him? What are some of the business insights that you get from your father?
No, everything really. When he started, he didn't have a reputation to go on. He couldn't get access to the kind of funding I can get access to. I mean, everything was a challenge for him, even talent at that time, trained manpower. So he was really, in the sense, the true entrepreneur and visionary, as you put it. What I learned from him was that how to assess different opportunities very quickly, not waste time with things that aren't going to work out. And that's a very important aspect. You can go down the wrong direction and lose 4 or 5 years, forget the financial loss if you make the wrong decision.
Sure.
I also learned from him that, do whatever you can do for the masses and for humanity. Don't try to focus on profits. That can always come later. Make something of good quality, whether it's a product or a service. And be very proud to talk about it. When I was a lot younger, very ambitious, I'm still ambitious, but I was very impatient to achieve my goals and ambitions. And in that, sometimes you can falter. You try to do something or do too many things at one time, and you can make mistakes there. He was rather able to control my growth or ambitions at that time, which was very important. And then once you sort of get into your own groove and realize what the right level of growth is and level of risk is, I think that's the perfect balance if you want to be able to sustain something for a long time. Mm-hmm. So I think I've sort of got a good sense of that from him as well. And of course, the final thing was to maintain integrity no matter what. So, at the cost of your reputation, people may want to sometimes do things or whatever it is. And we said that, our reputation is something we can never get back. So don't ever do anything to compromise your reputation. So these were some of the things. I mean, I can go on, but, just to name 3 or 4 things, these were the sort of things that I've learned from my father.
Adar, you did say once that it takes you about 10 minutes to figure out whether you should really explore something further or not. How? How do you do that?
Well, I simply look at the hassle and is it worth it? No matter, and as I again said, I don't look at the profits or whatever. Is it worth doing for the effort that one's going to have to put in? And of course, what's the risks and downsides? What's my way to exit out of the deal or the situation? And if that is clear and doable, then we can go into doing the due diligence and whatever it is. A lot of people may spend a lot of time trying to work it out to really try and just make it work. The true, I would say, clue here in this is that if something is really so difficult and complicated, just don't bother with it, because you're going to keep facing hitches and all of that. Don't let this be misconstrued that one gives up easily. I'm actually very determined, once I've made a commitment to someone or a deal, that I will ensure at whatever cost to see it through.
So in hindsight, what do you think really prepared you for the COVID mission? When you decided to manufacture Covishield, it was a huge responsibility you were willing to shoulder. What prepared you for it?
Well, mentally and psychologically, I was always prepared to take on a challenge like this, because I felt that if there is a calamity like this, if you're in a position to help or contribute, it's almost your responsibility to do so.
Sure.
In terms of infrastructure and capital, which was the other part of the game. So what prepared us for that was a couple of things. Ever since I took over in 2011 as CEO, I always invested in capacity ahead of time for different vaccines and different technologies. If it wasn't for that, this would have taken 4 years to build, and we wouldn't be even sitting here having this conversation. The last part of the puzzle was getting enough capital. We deployed more than 10,000, 12,000 crores actually in CapEx and OpEx to be able to handle the capacity that we did in COVID. I spoke to, private equity funds. We went to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, that they gave us a lot of capital at risk to manage as an advance for the vaccines. We finally didn't raise any private equity or go for any listing, because we got advances from countries on the orders and philanthropic donations to help with the advanced procurement of the vaccines from Gavi, UNICEF, and the Gates Foundation. So that's how I managed that part. And of course, we deployed all our capital as much as we could of our own savings into this. So that's why it meant a big deal to us. But by then, once we were licensed to then increase capacity, the risk was relatively small in the sense that we knew it was going to work out. But initially, we had deployed about $300 to $400 million of our own capital, which could have just been destroyed.
Sure.
Getting all those three parts of the puzzle together was how, to answer your question, I prepared myself to deal with the commitment.
You spoke about the criticisms during the time. You were subjected to quite a bit setbacks. There was a fire accident in the campus. A couple of floors were destroyed. So it wasn't really a very easy ride.
No, it wasn't.
It wasn't. Tell me one thing, how did you cope? How did you face the situation? There were flip-flops when it came to distribution, when it came to pricing, the vaccine shortage, blackmails.
Well,
threatening
no,
calls.
I'll tell you, it was, I coped with it, to answer your question in short, compartmentalization. So what I would do is, on a daily basis, only look at and think about what I have to sort out today. If I would keep thinking about everything, then I was on the verge of having a meltdown. And that's the way I coped, and both mentally and physically, to just get on with, delivering enough vaccines, responding to some of the political and media sort of distortions, I would say, in facts and informations that happened, sadly, due to various different reasons. And look, it was a global crisis, and then there was an India crisis. And then there was politicization of that crisis, both globally and in India. So, the government of India did the best they could, I think better than any other country.
Sure.
I must say that. And I truly mean it. Given the situation that we were going through. And look, there were many expectations to manage from the public, opposition parties, the media, and foreign media, who felt it was their sort of, right or need to sort of highlight things out of context, just to create a bit of a story. But then even they realized, and they've now, applauded the way India has handled
Sure.
things. So that all was happening all at the same time. So I think it looked and felt very cluttered and confusing and stressful, which it was. But I think in about 2 or 3 months, all that sort of subsided once the supplies picked up and everyone else was getting, the vaccine coverage was going up. Don't forget, earlier on in India, despite having enough vaccine, there weren't many people to take it. When the second wave hit, the entire country wanted to get the vaccine. So obviously at that time, someone's going to have to wait. It's like a queue. I mean, someone has to get it first before you, and then you can get it. First come, first serve, or whatever. So that was particularly a challenging period in the months of May, June, April, May, June. And by July, August, it all sort of, everyone realized that, look, they have to wait and take it. And they will get it, and they did get it. They got 2 doses. Even the 3rd dose has been offered by the government.
I remember sometime around May, June 2021, I think a week or two, you went silent, no tweets, no updates. And then...
No, I think that was best, no, because why keep commenting on something? See, the only time I would speak or share information on Twitter or wherever else was when it was necessary. When it was necessary to perhaps clarify something that needed to be clarified, or to share information or updates. I was tried to be as responsible and careful.
The threats would have been very distressing.
No, that I would want to comment on. I think that was something best left to be in the past.
So, COVID is something people will not forget in a hurry. It's something that will stay with us for a very long time. How do you want to be remembered for your role in this crisis?
I don't know how I'll be remembered, but I hope that I'll be just remembered as someone who tried their best, given the circumstances, and did deliver a lot more than what even I promised. We were talking about delivering 1 billion doses every year. We delivered 2 billion doses in 1 year.
What's your dream project now? I mean, after such a big project and after being part of a historic mission, so to say, what next?
Well, 2 things. Just to further secure and ensure that we're never in this position again, I've decided to build the world's largest pandemic facility, which is just 2 buildings down. It can produce 2 billion doses on its own. And we could vaccinate, let's say, for example, a country like India in a matter of 3 months. So, that's my sort of future security plan to ensure that India at least is protected, and other countries. God forbid there is another pandemic, and there could be. Or there could be these other outbreaks in certain regions that you keep seeing, like Ebola in Africa and other places. So that's one sort of dream to sort of do, so that, there won't be this clamoring and running around and stressful situation, in the future. God forbid there is a pandemic or a biological threat or anything like that. So that's one part. The other dream, of course, is to find a cure and a solution to HIV. I know it's not as serious as it was earlier, because the nice drugs that don't give you reactions and all of that to it. But that was always our dream, my father's dream and mine, the last 20 years, to find something. We're close on it. We found something which could work, but it's too soon to, celebrate. So I'm sort of excited and hopeful that that dream one day could be fulfilled. Now we continue to focus on so many other vaccines and areas that I was always very passionate about in making a positive impact, like the HPV vaccine to prevent cervical cancer in women, the malaria vaccine, which we hope to launch also at the end of the year for the continent of Africa, a dengue vaccine coming out in 2 to 3 years, 2.5 to 3 years, for both India and other parts of Asia. So, all these sort of major diseases that can affect children and women is what I've been focusing on to make an impact on. And of course, very far-fetched R&D projects on, working on a vaccine to prevent HIV, TB, for example, because those are the other 2 major areas where no one has been able to really find a prevention or a proper treatment without, other side effects and issues. So we're working on those kind of things as well.
Mm-hmm. At what stage are these projects that you spoke about? HPV, of course, has been rolled out.
Yeah, malaria end of this year.
Yes.
Dengue, as I said, is going through clinical trials. Some of the other products I mentioned or things are just in the early developmental research stage. like at a phase 1 kind of stage. So, when it gets to a phase 3 level, you can really then tell whether something's going to work out or not. Before that, yes, you can establish some kind of safety. But again, till you get into larger human trials, you don't know how effective or safe a new drug or a product is. So we have to wait and watch, especially with these new technologies.
Sure.
Using an old past technology with a carrier protein or a live virus, a platform, you have some sense. But when it's totally different, like messenger RNA or something else, we don't know the other effects it can have on your body. So we have to really go slow and make sure that you don't put lives at risk, even in clinical trials. So you have to just start with small numbers and then make your way up to larger numbers. And
Since you took over as CEO, I think over 10 years ago, you've also had an interest in the NBFC space. Tell us a bit about that. What are some investments and some growth plans you have for this sector?
So we invested roughly 3,500 to 4,000 crores, in different stages to make to acquire the Magma Group. We had started our own NBFC, Poonawalla Finance, in 2019. Then the pandemic came, so of course all my focus was on Serum. Look, even if you went 5 years ago, the digitization, the way in which you collect money, the way in which you give out loans, advertise and reach, very different. And when I saw this shift happening, along with, for example, a certain other NBFCs going bust and out of the market because they had their own issues or whatever, I felt there's a vacuum and there's a good opportunity and space for a good, well-run, digitized sort of NBFC. India is on a growth path, whether it's your personal aspirations and dreams and ambitions, you will always need credit to grow along with India's growth story. So we said, look, let's get a good team together and see if we can do something here. Of course, building something from scratch takes time, which is what we started. But within a year and a half, we got into this opportunity which we found with the Magma Group and acquired them, which had also a housing company as a subsidiary, which right now we've done a deal to sell off. And, it gave us a sort of 5-year leapfrogging sort of situation where you have branches, a team, credit team, everything, And of course, we rejigged that to customize it to get out of certain business areas and territories which weren't so good, and certain products that weren't so good. But, now we're in a very good spot where we're not giving large loans, for example. We never wanted to do that because we've left that to other people to do because the risks are very different. And so our loans are, 30 lakhs, 40 lakhs, 50 lakhs. It could be for, SMEs, MSEs, or personal individual loans, things like that, and many other products. So I think given the market size, given the fact that some other players had gone out, and given our credit name and credibility, we thought we'd always be able to raise funds at a very, very low cost, which is what we are doing.
You've also been able to enter the insurance space, which is a very regulated space. What are some other white spaces that you are optimistic about and would want to have a presence in?
No, so we believe in the India story, and we've launched also the Poonawalla Vision Fund, which is going to invest in both privately listed companies mainly, and also early stage companies, and also partly listed entities.
What's the corpus of the fund?
Well, right now it's only 1,000 crores,
Okay.
but we will make that $1 billion with some of outside capital and more of our own capital. We foresee doing that in the next year or two. Just waiting for the markets to stabilize a little bit, and then we can sort of make our investments. But we've got a great team together ready as well. We have, $500 million invested in the stock market. That's separate. But, this will take care of investments in the privately listed space. We already have some very good investments like, the retail chain Wellness Forever. We own, 30% in that. We've got a 50% stake in the largest RT-PCR and testing company of test kits in India called My Labs. So we just wanted to streamline these sort of investments and formalize them into a proper structure with the team. So we're looking at doing that. and then taking some of these companies for a listing. So had it not been for the Russia-Ukraine crisis and the initial markets and things being disrupted, we had already filed the DHRP for wellness for a listing. We'll probably look at doing that again at the end of the year. But, so taking a couple of companies listed. So I will have a few listed companies. Maybe Serum comes much later, if at all. But, so that's what we were looking at.
Mm-hmm. So Serum is something you are considering for listing
No,
in terms
not right now. I said, see, we've got the financial services and maybe the general insurance company lists later on in a couple of years, and some of these other investments that we want to, go for an IPO. But not for Serum, because Serum now doesn't need capital. I mean, the only time we could have taken on an investor was during the COVID crisis to raise, $2 billion. But then we didn't, also because I succeeded in getting the capital from others, from countries and philanthropists. But more importantly, we weren't getting the kind of valuations that I would have been comfortable with. Investors right now are, how do I put it, more eager to put in their capital in loss-making, cash-burning companies for 10 billion, 20 billion, all of that. They don't value, maybe now they will start to value companies which have no debt and throw up a very good profit, profit figure and profit margin. I think they've traditionally looked at these disruptive, high growth, loss-making companies, which I don't think is even one of them have ever worked out. So I think once they change their mindset and come back to the traditional businesses, brick and mortar, which have stable, history and no debt and all of that, I think that's when maybe we can look at talking to them on the right valuation, because right now it wasn't making sense.
Sure. What is the valuation that you describe to Serum at this point?
I don't know. It could be anything. It all depends on the multiples for the sector in the markets.
You don't have much debt on your books. And as you said, it's a good business, so there would be a premium attached to that.
Well, this is the thing. Investors don't look at it that way. They don't mind you, in fact, having some debt so that you can grow and expand aggressively. But 9 times out of 10, as I had mentioned to you earlier, that has never worked out for any business. When you take debt, little debt is fine, but if you overdo it to, buy other companies or expand aggressively and your plans don't work out, then your debt really hits you. And we've seen that time and time again, both for traditional businesses and for these startup type of disruptor businesses. So I just cannot understand why investors would not want to look at a safer bet with stable cash flows. And yes, okay, the growth is 5%, 10%, not 50%, 60%. See, you can't grow like that in certain businesses.
Sure.
That's the difference that an investor has to understand. And maybe then they'll do better. That's my 2 cents to that.
As a second generation entrepreneur, what's your dream, hope for the third generation? Are you confident they'll join the business? Are they interested?
I hope so. No, they're both interested. I mean, they're 7 and 13, so they're very young. I think my peak interest was in my teenage years. My idea would be to bring them back as soon as possible after their foreign education, because if you spend too much time abroad, you tend not to sort of want to come back to India, or you have other ideas. So I will, of course, try my best and do what my father did with me. And hopefully they'll want to, at least one of them will want to continue the legacy. But look, a lot of other Indian groups also have been very successful. I think the Burman group has a professionally managed team where the family members don't get into the, get into the thing. So that's always a viable model. When you come to the 3rd generation, 4th generation, maybe they're not interested. Maybe, they don't want to stay in the same country or whatever. So I hope that doesn't happen with us. But of course, that's 20, 30 years away. I don't hope to retire for at least another 30 years.
No, that's not what I meant.
Yeah. So that decision we'll take at that time based on not only their interest, but I think their capability. I mean, they're both very smart boys, but will they be able to handle the situation at that time? I don't know what state the company, the environment, and all that will be, I'm sure it'll be much better than even it is today, but you never know. So if they want to handle it, if they can handle it, great. We'll try our best to do that. If not, then of course, there's a way of professionalizing it and, keeping that going where they would just, I guess, remain as shareholders or whatever.
Adar, do you think the last 3 years has helped you come out of your father's shadow, or, the flamboyant personality that was always attached to you, and that kind of eclipsed the kind of work you did, the dedication you
Yes,
had?
I think to a certain extent, absolutely. Of course, the company and we weren't visible, let's put it that way, in this sense or to this level because, we were just seen as a regular corporate group or whatever. And yes, there's always been our lifestyle, which has attracted a lot of attention because that sort of thing generally does, as human beings are more curious perhaps to see what car you're going in or plane or something. But, we've always been very serious businessmen and people, and our philanthropic work has meant a lot to us. Yes, I think that really put the spotlight on really what we are doing and what we're capable of also, especially in a crisis. And yes, I think it did highlight that, yes, I was sort of making all the decisions and, being able to call the shots thanks to my father giving me the freedom. A lot of first generation entrepreneurs don't do that. Even today, I may have debates and arguments with my father just, to decide what the right course of thing is. And he's been always very supportive. Ultimately, even if he doesn't agree with something, he would probably agree to it later saying that, okay, fine, if this is what you really want to do, then just do it. Or just be careful or, whatever, which is great to have a sounding board and do that. So I think that did help, of course. For me, coming out of his shadow, in my opinion, was never a factor. I never looked at it that way. He's always going to be the person who has taught me everything and been the original visionary for which, we wouldn't even be here and this company wouldn't be here. Everyone, I think, knows that. I just felt that, yes, it's good that, it's important that a next generation always has the opportunity to at least perform. Whether it's you succeed, fail is something else. But I think it's important and to acknowledge the freedom he gave me to be able to even do what I'm doing here today. A lot of second generations and third generations I've witnessed haven't been given that, especially at the age that I was given it. So I'm always going to be grateful for that. And I think that's a very important factor. A lot of first and second generations, and this is typical of Indian culture, and I keep reminding my father about this. You want us to be groomed up from the time we are 15 or whatever. We wake up at 7:30 in the morning and go with you. Learn everything from you. Expect to be given responsibility. It's funny and ironic that they want someone to take over their legacy, but then when it comes to taking it over, it's like,
hesitant,
like this. So I hope that others and other family groups, in lighter vein, make some sense, because they know exactly what I'm saying. So the actions really have to speak louder than words. And it can be very demoralizing to, a second or third generation if, this kind of gaslighting happens.
Adar, thank you very much for this conversation, for being so honest and so candid and sharing your views.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thank you.